Something is wrong. You can feel it before you can name it. The plant looked fine last week, or the week before, and now there is something in the way it holds itself, the way the leaves are positioned, the way the color has shifted by just enough to register as wrong without being obviously wrong. You stand there looking at it and the question forms slowly. Is it dying? That moment, that specific quiet moment of not knowing is what this video is about. Not the dramatic collapse, not the obvious rot or the clearly snapped stem. The mystery, the slow decline that gives you no single obvious clue, only a collection of small signals that together add up to something serious if you know how to read them. Most gardening content tells you what to do when you already know what is wrong. Today I want to do something different. I want to teach you how to figure out what is wrong when you cannot tell. How to read a plant the way a detective reads a scene, systematically, without jumping to conclusions, starting with what is observable and working toward what is probable. Because here is the truth that will change how you garden from this point forward. Plants do not get sick randomly. There is always a cause, always a sequence, and almost always, somewhere in the days and weeks before visible symptoms appeared, there was a decision, a change in care, a shift in environment, a new stress. That started the chain. The fertilizer application on dry soil last month. The container moved to a new spot after you rearranged the porch. The watering schedule that quietly slipped from every 3 days to every 10 days during a busy stretch. The week of unexpected rain that kept the soil saturated longer than the drainage could handle. These are not dramatic events, they are ordinary moments. But they are the starting points of every slow plant decline, and finding them is how you find the recovery. Let us solve this together. The first thing you do when you suspect a plant is declining is not to water it, not to fertilize it, not to move it, not to prune it. The first thing you do is observe it without touching it. Stand back. Look at the whole plant. What does the overall posture tell you? A plant that is wilting uniformly, all stems and leaves drooping at once, is telling you something different from a plant that is wilting only at the top, while the lower leaves stay firm. A plant that has dropped its lower leaves but is still producing new growth at the tips is in a completely different situation from a plant whose new growth is the first thing that is suffering, the whole posture before any single symptom. Take a photograph of the plant before you do anything else. Having a reference image of how it looks right now before any intervention gives you something concrete to compare against in a week. Gardeners who photograph before they intervene make better decisions than gardeners who rely on memory alone, because memory tends to adjust toward the outcome rather than the starting point. The second observation is color. Not just whether leaves are yellow or brown, but where on the plant the color change is happening and in what pattern. Color changes that begin at the oldest, lowest leaves and work upward tell a specific biological story. Nitrogen and other mobile nutrients are being relocated from old tissue to young tissue, which means there is a shortage somewhere in the supply chain. Color changes that begin at the newest growth, the smallest, most recently emerged leaves, tell the opposite story. Something that should be available is not reaching the growing points at all, which often points to a vascular or root uptake problem, rather than a simple nutrient shortage. Color changes that happen simultaneously across the entire plant suggest an environmental cause, temperature shock, chemical exposure, sudden overwatering, or root damage that affected the whole system at once. Color changes that are localized to specific stems or sections while adjacent stems remain healthy suggest a localized problem, a blocked or infected stem, a pest colony concentrated in one area of the plant, physical damage to a specific section of the root zone. When you see yellowing on one side while the other stays green, look for something physical near that section of the root zone. A tool strike that clipped a root, a cracked section of container wall, a spot where water consistently pools on one side. Localized symptoms have localized causes, and finding the specific cause is faster and more precise than treating the symptom generally from above. The third observation is the soil. Before you do anything to the plant itself, examine the soil. Press your finger 2 inches into it. Is it wet, moist, barely damp, or bone dry? Note this carefully because it is one of the 2 most important data points you will collect. A plant in wet soil that is showing wilting or yellowing is experiencing a completely different crisis than a plant in dry soil showing the same symptoms, same appearance, opposite causes, opposite treatments. Knowing the soil moisture state before you do anything else is the single most important discipline in plant diagnostics. Look at the soil surface with genuine attention. White crusty deposits around the container rim or across the surface indicate salt accumulation from fertilizer or hard water. High salt concentration around the root zone creates osmotic pressure that draws moisture away from roots even when water is present, effectively dehydrating them despite adequate watering. A green tinge suggests algae growth, meaning the soil stays wet too long between waterings and is developing the anaerobic conditions that allow root rot fungi to establish. Soil pulling away from container edges with a visible gap means the mix has become hydrophobic. Water poured from above runs down that gap and exits through drainage holes without ever reaching the roots at all. Compacted, unusually hard surface soil suggests old potting mix that has broken down and lost its structure, reducing its ability to support healthy root function regardless of your watering practices. The fourth observation is the roots. If you have done the first three observations and you still cannot determine the cause, it is time to look underground. For container plants, this is straightforward. Carefully lift the plant from its pot and examine the root ball. What you are looking for is simple and binary. Healthy roots are white or pale tan and firm. Unhealthy roots are brown, gray, black, or soft. The smell test is equally definitive. Healthy roots and healthy soil have a clean, earthy smell. Root rot smells foul. If you lift a container plant and catch a smell that is wrong, the root system is compromised somewhere. For in-ground plants, carefully excavate around the base with a hand trowel and examine the roots closest to the stem. Dig about 6 inches out from the stem and 4 inches deep, looking for the fine feeder roots that do the actual work of water and nutrient absorption. In a healthy plant, these should be present and numerous. In drought-stressed plants, they may be sparse or absent. In root rot conditions, they will be absent or present only as collapsed, dark remnants. Scratch the surface of any visible root with a fingernail. Healthy root tissue is white or pale tan beneath the outer layer. Damaged tissue is brown or soft all the way through. Whether fine feeders are present, sparse, or absent tells you directly how much capacity the plant currently has to support a recovery. Now, with those 4 observations complete, you have enough information to begin building your diagnosis. This is where the detective work happens. You are looking for the pattern that connects what you see above ground with what you find in the soil and at the roots. Before I walk you through the specific patterns, I want to address the most common mistake gardeners make at this exact moment. They match the first symptom they see to a remedy they know and they stop there. Yellowing leaves must be nitrogen, add fertilizer. Wilting must be dry, add water. That single symptom approach fails a significant percentage of the time because it ignores the other 3 observations. The correct approach is to look for the pattern that fits all 4 observations simultaneously. A plant with yellowing leaves in wet soil is in a fundamentally different situation from a plant with yellowing leaves in dry soil. A plant wilting in wet soil with dark, mushy roots is different from a plant wilting in dry soil with pale, sparse roots. The combination of all 4 observations narrows the diagnosis from 6 or 7 possibilities to 1 or 2. Take the extra 30 seconds to confirm that your diagnosis fits all 4 data points before you do anything to the plant. Pattern 1. Wilting or yellowing with wet soil and dark, soft roots. This is the most common mismanaged plant emergency in container gardening, and it has a name. Root rot. The cause is almost always overwatering combined with inadequate drainage. The plant appears to need more water because it cannot absorb what is in the soil. Giving it more water makes the root environment more anaerobic, worsening the decay. The treatment is the opposite of what instinct suggests. Stop watering. Remove the plant from the container. Trim all dark, soft root tissue with clean, sterilized scissors. Dust cut surfaces with powdered cinnamon or a commercial fungicide. Let the root ball air dry for 1 to 2 hours. Repot in fresh, dry, well-draining mix with 30% coarse perlite. Do not water for 48 hours. The plant will look worse before it recovers, sometimes noticeably so in the first week, as it adjusts to the new soil environment and the remaining healthy roots reestablish function. Resist the strong instinct to water during this period unless the soil is completely bone dry. 3 weeks of patient observation will tell you whether the intervention succeeded. New growth emerging from the tips is the clearest indicator of recovery. If no new growth appears within 3 to 4 weeks and the plant continues to decline, the root damage was likely too extensive for recovery. In that case, propagate healthy stem cuttings from above the damaged area as your path forward, preserving the plant genetically, even if the original root system cannot be recovered. Pattern 2. Wilting with dry soil, lightweight container, and roots that are pale but fine and sparse rather than thick and healthy. This is chronic underwatering combined with root desiccation. The root system has been diminished by repeated drought cycles. Simple watering will not fully solve this quickly because the root system has shrunk from what it should be and cannot absorb water efficiently even when it is available. The soil in chronically dry containers often becomes hydrophobic, meaning it repels water rather than absorbing it. So standard watering runs off the surface without reaching the roots at all. Set the entire container in a basin of water for 30 to 60 minutes to rehydrate the soil from below. Resume regular, consistent watering on a schedule rather than waiting for visible wilt. Mulch the top of the container soil to reduce evaporation. The recovery timeline is several weeks as the root system slowly rebuilds its capacity from the minimum it has been reduced to. Check soil moisture every 2 days by pressing a finger 2 inches into the soil rather than relying on the surface appearance alone, because the surface dries faster than the root zone and will mislead you into watering before the deeper soil is ready. Once the plant shows new growth at the tips, the root system has rebuilt enough capacity to support active growth, and normal care can gradually resume from that point. Pattern 3. Yellowing leaves with green veins on the youngest growth, with moist, well-managed soil and otherwise healthy-looking roots. This is iron chlorosis, and it is almost never caused by a lack of iron in the soil. It is almost always caused by soil that is too alkaline, above a pH of 7.0, which locks iron into a chemical form that roots cannot absorb. A soil pH test, available as an inexpensive kit at any hardware store, will confirm this in minutes. The treatment is soil acidification with elemental sulfur, acidic mulch such as pine bark, or aluminum sulfate applied over time, combined with an immediate iron chelate foliar spray to address visible symptoms while the soil adjustment takes effect over the following weeks. If you are in a region with naturally alkaline soil or irrigation water, as is common across the western United States, the Midwest, and areas with limestone bedrock, this will be a recurring management issue. Incorporating acidic mulch as a top dressing and testing soil pH periodically allows you to manage alkalinity before chlorosis symptoms appear, rather than responding after the visual damage is already visible. Pattern 4. Brown, scorched leaf edges progressing inward, with otherwise healthy roots and appropriate soil moisture. The leaves look burned at the margins. This is chemical burn, almost always from fertilizer applied too heavily or to soil that was too dry when fertilized, or from salt accumulation from repeated fertilization without periodic flushing. The fix is to flush the container soil with 2 full container volumes of clean water, allowing it to pour through the drainage holes and carry dissolved salt concentrations out with it. Do this twice in the same session for thorough clearing of the root zone. Withhold all fertilization for 4 to 6 weeks to allow the root zone to stabilize. When you resume, start at half the recommended dose, and apply one rule permanently to prevent this pattern from recurring. Never fertilize dry soil. Water the plant first, allow it to drain completely, and then apply fertilizer to a moist root zone where concentration gradients are far less extreme and the risk of root tissue damage from osmotic stress is far lower. Pattern 5. Spotted leaves where the spots have yellow halos and are spreading with or without wilting. This pattern suggests a living pathogen rather than a cultural cause, a bacterial or fungal infection that is actively reproducing and moving across the leaf surface. The key diagnostic question here is speed. How fast are the spots spreading? Fungal infections tend to spread relatively slowly, over days to weeks. Bacterial infections can spread visibly from day to day. If spots are spreading rapidly, treat urgently. Remove all affected leaves immediately with sterilized scissors. Bag and dispose of them without composting. For fungal infections, apply a copper-based fungicide or neem oil spray to all remaining foliage. Improve air circulation. Switch to base watering and eliminate all overhead moisture. For bacterial infections, the same mechanical removal and copper spray applies, but the urgency is higher. One additional spot pattern requiring the fastest possible response. Small water-soaked lesions expanding rapidly to brown or black within 48 hours, sometimes with a foul odor and surrounding tissue that collapses quickly, is bacterial infection. Bacterial infections cannot be treated with fungicides. The only intervention is immediate mechanical removal of all affected tissue, cutting generously into clearly healthy tissue beyond the visible infection margin, and sterilizing tools between each cut. Copper-based sprays on surrounding healthy tissue provide some protection against further airborne spread. If bacterial infection reaches the crown of the plant, recovery is unlikely. Speed of removal is the complete treatment. There is no chemical correction. Pattern 6. Perfectly healthy-looking foliage, but no flowers on a plant that should be blooming. This is one of the most misread conditions in gardening because the plant looks fine and nothing obviously signals distress. But no flowering on a mature plant that has been fed and watered and given adequate light is telling you something specific about the nutritional and hormonal balance of the plant. The most common cause by a wide margin is excessive nitrogen. Too much nitrogen drives vegetative growth at the direct expense of flowering. Nitrogen is the gas pedal for leaves. Phosphorus is the signal that triggers flowering. If your fertilization program has been nitrogen-heavy, you have been pressing the accelerator for leaves and the plant has obliged. Stop all nitrogen-containing fertilizers immediately. Flush the container or ground zone with clean water. Switch to a bloom booster formula with high phosphorus and low nitrogen and wait 3 to 4 weeks. In most cases, the plant will begin setting buds within that window. A fourth cause worth knowing for specific species. Some perennials genuinely require 2 to 3 years of establishment before committing to reliable bloom production. Baptisia false indigo takes 3 full years. Some ornamental grasses and deep-rooted native species take 2 seasons. If your plant is young, well-sited and otherwise healthy but simply not yet blooming, patience is sometimes the complete and only correct intervention. Pattern 7. Rapid wilting. Complete collapse within days, without obvious soil moisture issues and without the slow progression that characterizes most root problems. This is the pattern that requires the most urgent response because it suggests either a sudden systemic block, the vascular system has been physically damaged or blocked, the crown of the plant has rotted through, or a severe pest infestation has damaged the root zone below the soil surface to the point of catastrophic failure. Examine the stem at the soil line immediately. Soft, water-soaked, or dark tissue at the crown indicates crown rot. Cut away all affected tissue immediately with sterilized scissors. If any firm tissue remains at the crown, dust with fungicide and attempt to root healthy stems above the damage as cuttings. The original crown may not be recoverable, but propagation from healthy material above the damage preserves the plant genetically. If the crown is firm and healthy but the stem is hollow, or shows a clear severance just below the soil, look for cutworms or stem borers in the soil around the plant base. Now you know how to read the mystery. Not perfectly, not every time, but systematically and scientifically in a way that gives you a real chance to identify the cause before it becomes irreversible. The pattern recognition you have just built is the actual skill at the center of plant health management. It is not green thumb. It is not intuition. It is observation, logic, and a framework for connecting what you see with what it means. Here is what I want you to do today. Go look at every plant that has been bothering you. The one you have been avoiding because it does not look right. The one you have been overwatering in the hope that more water might fix whatever is wrong. Run through the 4 observations. Whole plant posture, color pattern, soil moisture, root condition. See which pattern it matches. Then apply the right response to the right problem in the right order. Most of the time, the plant is not as far gone as it looks. Most of the time, the right intervention applied in time is enough. What separates the gardeners who recover plants from the gardeners who lose them is almost never skill level or experience. It is whether they diagnose before they treat. It is whether they look before they act. Now go look. Not at the easy plants. At the one that has been nagging you. Run through the 4 observations in order. Whole plant posture, color pattern, soil condition, roots if necessary. Match what you find to the 7 patterns. Then act on the right cause in the right order with precision rather than instinct. What separates gardeners who recover struggling plants from gardeners who lose them is almost never experience level or green thumb. It is whether they diagnose before they treat, whether they look carefully before they act. That discipline, practiced consistently, is the entire margin between a plant that comes back and one that does not. Drop a comment describing the mystery your plant is showing right now. Tell me the whole posture, the color pattern, the soil condition, and anything else you notice. I will tell you which pattern it matches and what to do. I read every single comment. Give this a thumbs up if the framework helped and subscribe for practical, science-based gardening content every single week.